The grand hall of the Zelvarian palace was silent as Princess Syra entered, her steps echoing on the polished obsidian floor. The towering columns of the chamber were decorated with golden carvings of past emperors, their fierce gazes watching over the empire they had built. At the far end of the hall, sitting upon a throne of dark crystal, was Emperor Vorthin, her father, ruler of the mighty Zelvarian Empire. Vdira had been summoned urgently, and she could already sense that something was wrong. Her father's piercing green eyes locked onto her as she approached. His expression was stern, unreadable. The members of the High Council stood in a semicircle around him, their flowing robes marking their rank and status. The air was heavy with expectation. Syra. The Emperor finally spoke, his deep voice commanding absolute attention. A decision has been made for the good of the Empire. She remained silent, waiting. Her father never wasted words, but when he did speak, it was always absolute law. "You are to be wed," he said. Syra's heart froze. The words felt like a shockwave through her body. She clenched her fists, barely able to believe what she had just heard. "Married," she repeated, her voice sharp. "To whom?" Emperor Vorthin's expression didn't change. "To a human." Syra's breath caught in her throat. A human. Of all the species in the galaxy, he was asking her to marry one of them. The weak, fragile creatures that had only recently joined the interstellar community. Her voice rose in anger. "Father, I will marry anyone but a human." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The High Council exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke to the Emperor like that, not even his own daughter. Vorthin's gaze hardened. "This is not a request, Syra. It is a decree." Syra felt her body tense with rage. She had trained her whole life to be a warrior, a leader, the future Empress of Zelvaria. She was supposed to forge alliances through conquest, not marriage. "This is madness," she spat. "Why would we bind our noble bloodline to such lesser beings?" The Emperor's expression didn't waver. "Because war is coming, and our empire cannot stand alone." Syra's mind raced. The Zelvarian Empire had always been one of the strongest forces in the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, ruled with power and fear. Why would they need an alliance with humans, a species that was still so new to space? One of the counselors, Lord Veclan, stepped forward. His wrinkled face was calm, but his golden eyes held the weight of centuries of wisdom. "The Terran Federation has advanced faster than any species in history," he explained. "Their technology, their strategies, they are unpredictable, adaptable. If we do not form a bond with them, our enemies will." Syra's jaw clenched. She hated that they were speaking as if humans were equals. "You expect me to lower myself to one of them," she growled. "To share my life, my blood, my throne with a human." The Emperor's voice was cold. "You will do your duty." Syra felt trapped. She had never been given a choice in her life. Trained from birth to be a warrior, raised to be the next ruler. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. She stepped forward, her golden armor glinting under the high chandeliers of the palace. She would not accept this. "I refuse." Silence. The counselors looked between each other, some whispering, some shaking their heads. The Emperor's expression darkened. "If you refuse," he said slowly, "you will be stripped of your title. You will no longer be Princess of Zelvaria." Syra's blood ran cold. No title, no power, no legacy. She would become a nobody. Her entire life, everything she had fought for, would be taken away. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. This was not a choice. This was a threat. The Emperor stood, his cape flowing behind him like a shadow. "You will meet the human tomorrow," he said. "You will show him respect, and in one cycle, you will be wed." Syra's body burned with fury, but she knew that if she argued further, she might not walk out of this chamber alive. Her father's word was law. She turned sharply on her heel, her long silver hair whipping behind her as she stormed out of the throne room. As the heavy doors slammed shut behind her, she let out a sharp breath. Zaira stood on the balcony of her private chambers, glaring at the night sky. Stars twinkled in the vast darkness, but all she could see was her own frustration. Somewhere among those stars, a human was traveling toward her home, her future husband. The thought disgusted her. She had spent the entire night replaying her father's words. Marry a human or lose everything. It was a trap, a cruel way to force her into obedience. But Sarah was no weak-willed princess. If they thought she would simply bow down and accept this fate, they were gravely mistaken. A knock echoed through the chamber. Idara turned sharply. Enter. The door slid open, revealing her personal attendant, Syria. The young Zelvarian woman hesitated before speaking. Princess, the human ambassador has arrived. Zira exhaled sharply. So it had begun. The royal docking bay was alive with activity. Zelvarian guards in golden armor stood in perfect formation as the human shuttle descended. Its sleek metal frame was far smaller than Zelvarian warships, yet its design was strangely elegant, efficient, purposeful. Zaira waited at the front, arms crossed, her golden cape flowing behind her. Her father stood beside her, expression unreadable. With a hiss of escaping air, the ship's hatch opened. The human stepped out. He was taller than expected. His frame was strong, his posture unshaken by the stares of an entire alien court. His uniform was crisp, marked with the insignia of the Terran Federation. But what stood out most was his eyes, sharp, intelligent, assessing everything. Daniel Carter, the man she was supposed to marry. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Zaira's mind screamed one thought. I hate him already. The introductions were painfully formal. The Emperor welcomed Daniel, speaking of the importance of their alliance. Daniel responded with calm confidence, his voice steady. He spoke of unity, of strengthening both civilizations. His words were carefully chosen, but Sarah did not trust them. Then, the moment she had been dreading arrived. I present to you my daughter, Princess Zaira, the Emperor declared. Zaira lifted her chin, stepping forward. She wanted him to see her for what she was, not some delicate princess, but a warrior, a ruler. Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, to her absolute shock, he smirked. I expected more hostility, he said, given your reputation. Zaira's eyes narrowed, and I expected more. Stature. A few gasps echoed from the court. Daniel's smirk deepened. Well, I suppose we're both full of surprises. Zaira clenched her fists. This human was mocking her. The Emperor, unfazed by the tension, gestured toward the palace. Come, you and the princess have much to discuss. Zaira gritted her teeth. This was going to be unbearable. Inside the palace, they were given a private chamber for their first conversation. A test, her father had called it. A chance to see if they could even tolerate each other. Zaira sat with her arms crossed as Daniel observed the room, seemingly unimpressed by the grandeur. Finally, he turned to her. I take it you're not thrilled about this arrangement. Zaira scoffed. You are human. That alone is enough reason. Daniel chuckled. He laughed. Zaira's eyes flashed with anger. You find this amusing. A little, Daniel admitted, sitting across from her. You act like I wanted this marriage. Believe me, princess, I didn't. Zaira frowned. Then why accept? His expression turned serious. Because humanity is tired of fighting wars. This alliance means peace. She studied him. His confidence, his unshaken resolve. He wasn't weak like she had assumed. But that didn't mean she had to accept him. I will not marry you, she said firmly. Daniel leaned back, smirking again. Then I guess we have something in common. For the first time, Zaira felt uncertain. Zaira couldn't shake the unease that settled in her chest. She had expected Daniel Carter to be arrogant, weak, or even desperate to marry into power. Instead, he was composed, calculating, and unshaken by her hostility. And that smirk, infuriating. She stormed through the palace corridors, her mind racing. This marriage was a trap, but was she the only one caught in it? Why had the Terran Federation agreed to this alliance? What did they stand to gain? She needed answers. But first, she needed leverage. That night, Syra moved silently through the halls of the palace, her golden armor swapped for a simple black cloak. The Imperial Archives held records of every diplomatic agreement, every military campaign, and most importantly, every secret deal her father had made. The corridors were empty, except for a few palace guards stationed at key points. They wouldn't question her presence, but if word got back to her father that she had been snooping, it would raise suspicion. Reaching the massive doors of the archives, she placed her hand against the security panel. It scanned her biometric signature, and the doors slid open without a sound. Inside, towering shelves of holographic data scrolls stretched into the distance. The air hummed with energy from the ancient databanks that held centuries of knowledge. She moved quickly, searching for files related to the Human-Zelverian Treaty. And then she found it. The Terran Federation did not propose the marriage. The request had come from the Zelverian Empire. Her father. Her blood ran cold. Before she could process the revelation, a soft voice echoed behind her. "I had a feeling you wouldn't take this marriage quietly." Syra spun around, her instincts sharp. Daniel Carter stood in the doorway, arms crossed. For a human, he was surprisingly stealthy. Her eyes narrowed. "You're following me." Daniel shrugged. "I saw you leave the palace hall and figured you were up to something." His gaze flicked to the holographic scroll in her hands. "Looks like I was right." Syra debated lying, but what was the point? He would see the truth himself soon enough. She tossed the scroll toward him. "Read it." Daniel caught the device, activated the display, and scanned the document. His expression shifted from mild curiosity to something darker. "Your father offered the marriage," he murmured, eyes flicking back to her. Syra folded her arms. "Seems that way." Silence settled between them, heavy with realization. "I was told this was a mutual agreement," Daniel said, voice edged with controlled frustration. "So was I," Syra admitted. "Clearly, we were both deceived." Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "That means there's something bigger at play here." Syra met his gaze, feeling a rare flicker of understanding between them. For the first time, she realized, they were both pawns in this game. And she hated being used. "Looks like we're on the same side after all. Human," she muttered. Daniel smirked. "Never thought I'd hear you say that." Syra and Daniel stood in the dimly lit Imperial Archives, the glow of the holographic scroll flickering between them. The revelation was clear. This marriage was not about diplomacy. It was a desperate move by her father. But why? The Zelverian Empire had never needed alliances before. Syra clenched her fists. She hated being manipulated. Daniel studied the scroll once more before glancing up at her. "If your father arranged this marriage, it means he's afraid of something. Something big." Syra hated to admit it, but he was right. Her father was a ruler of conquest, not compromise. He would never agree to such a humiliating treaty unless the alternative was worse. "We need more information," she said. Daniel smirked. "You're actually including me now. Progress." Syra shot him a glare. "Don't get used to it." The next morning, the Royal Council chamber was alive with heated discussion. High-ranking Zelverian officials and military leaders had gathered, their expressions grim. Syra and Daniel stood at the back, listening. "We cannot hold the outer colonies much longer," one general growled. "If we do not reinforce them, we will lose them within the next few cycles." Syra's eyes narrowed. "Lose them." Another official spoke, his voice urgent. "We cannot afford a war with the Dravkar Dominion right now. The humans. He stopped mid-sentence when he realized Daniel was standing in the room. The tension was palpable. Zyra stepped forward. "You're hiding something." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one answered. The Emperor, seated on his high throne, finally spoke. "There are things you do not yet need to know, Zyra." His tone was final. Zyra's anger burned. Enough secrets. She turned to Daniel. "Come, we'll find our own answers." She expected him to hesitate, but to her surprise, he nodded. "Lead the way, Princess." They moved quickly through the palace, heading toward the military intelligence wing. "I assume you have access to these files?" Daniel asked. Zyra smirked. "I assume you know how to break into secure databases." Daniel chuckled. "I like the way you think." Within minutes, they were inside a restricted chamber, standing before a holographic interface. Zyra placed her hand on the scanner, while Daniel worked his way through the security system. Human hacking skills were apparently not just a myth. Data flooded the screen. Zyra's breath caught. The Dravkar Dominion had mobilized an unstoppable fleet. The Zelvarian Empire was outmatched. And worse, there were reports of Dravkar spies operating within the palace. Zyra and Daniel exchanged a look. This wasn't just about marriage. Zyra's heart pounded as she scanned the intelligence files. The Dravkar Dominion wasn't just preparing for war. They had already infiltrated the Zelvarian Empire. There were spies inside the palace. Daniel studied the reports beside her, his jaw tightening. This isn't just an external war. They're planning to take down the Empire from the inside. Zyra forced herself to stay calm, which means we don't know who we can trust. Daniel nodded. "Accept each other." She shot him a glare, but she couldn't deny the truth of his words. Right now, he was the only one who wasn't tangled in Zelvarian politics. The only one with no reason to betray her. "We need proof," she said, her voice firm. "If there are spies in the palace, we have to find them before it's too late." Daniel smirked. "I assume you have a plan." Zyra crossed her arms. "Of course." That night, they set the trap. Using a false intelligence report, Zyra and Daniel leaked information about a supposed secret meeting between the Emperor and human military leaders. If the Dravkar had spies in the palace, they wouldn't be able to resist. Now, all they had to do was wait. The hidden chamber beneath the palace was cold and silent. Zyra and Daniel remained in the shadows, waiting for the bait to be taken. The room was supposedly empty. No guards, no surveillance, just an irresistible target for a traitor. Then footsteps. Zyra's grip on her weapon tightened. A figure in Zelvarian royal armor slipped into the room, moving with unnatural precision. Their glowing eyes flickered, scanning the surroundings. Then they reached for their wrist communicator. Zyra didn't wait. She moved like lightning, striking the traitor's arm and knocking the device away. The figure hissed, bearing sharp Dravkar fangs. A disguised infiltrator. The spy lunged at her, but before they could strike, a gunshot echoed. Daniel's plasma pistol sent the traitor crashing to the ground. Zyra stood over the fallen infiltrator, breathing heavily. "We have our proof." Daniel holstered his weapon. "Now comes the hard part." Zyra smirked. "Letting my father know he's been outplayed." Daniel chuckled. "That, and preparing for war." The Empire was compromised. The enemy was already inside. The captured Dravkar spy knelt in the royal interrogation chamber, bound by energy restraints. The flickering red glow of the restraints cast eerie shadows on the cold stone walls. Zyra stood tall, arms crossed, staring down at the infiltrator. Beside her, Daniel leaned casually against the wall, his sharp human eyes watching every move. Her father, the Emperor, sat on his high throne, his expression unreadable. The court had gathered in stunned silence, processing the unthinkable betrayal. A Dravkar spy inside the palace. It meant one thing. The war had already begun. Zyra stepped forward, her voice cold. Who do you answer to? The spy's lips curled into a smirk. You are already too late, Princess. A tense hush fell over the room. Daniel spoke next, his tone casual but laced with danger. See, I don't like cryptic threats. Maybe try a straight answer before things get uncomfortable for you. The spy chuckled, showing razor-sharp teeth. The Dominion is coming. Your empire is crumbling. And your pathetic marriage alliance. Meaningless. His black eyes gleamed with malice. You will all burn. The Emperor's expression darkened. He turned to his high commander. Prepare the fleets. We strike first. The Royal War Council assembled within the hour. Generals, strategists, and diplomats gathered around the glowing war table, where a holographic map displayed the latest intelligence. The Dravkar fleet was moving fast, already claiming border worlds. We cannot wait for them to strike. The High Commander declared, we must take the fight to them. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Zyra studied the map carefully. They want us to panic. They've sent infiltrators to weaken us before the real attack. Daniel, arms crossed, nodded. If we launch an all-out assault, we're playing into their hands. The Emperor's golden eyes locked onto Daniel. Then what do you suggest, human? Daniel didn't flinch. A tactical strike. Find their command ship, cut the head off the snake. A hush fell over the room. It was bold, dangerous. Zyra smirked. I like it. Her father studied them both for a long moment. Then he stood. Very well. We will send a small strike force to locate and destroy their command vessel. The decision was made. The first move belonged to the Zelvarian Empire. Zyra turned to Daniel. Looks like we're going to war together, human. Daniel's smirk returned. Took you long enough to admit we're on the same side. Zyra rolled her eyes. This was going to be interesting. The Zelvarian strike fleet tore through the darkness of space, sleek warships coated in obsidian armor reflecting distant stars. At the center of the fleet, the Imperial flagship, Eternal Wrath, carried Zyra, Daniel, and the strike team toward their most dangerous mission yet, to eliminate the Dravkar command vessel before the invasion could begin. The countdown had begun. Inside the war room, the holographic display flickered, revealing the location of the Dravkar command ship. It was positioned near the Zelvarian border, hidden behind a decoy fleet. Zyra studied the map. They know we'll come for them. Daniel leaned forward, a sharp glint in his eyes. Then let's give them exactly what they expect, until we don't. Zyra smirked. You have a plan. Daniel grinned. Always. The battle erupted like a supernova. Zelvarian warships charged forward, weapons blazing, engaging the Dravkar fleet in a violent space duel. The enemy fought fiercely, their sleek, insect-like vessels darting through the chaos. But the Zelvarians had something they didn't. Daniel's human unpredictability. Zyra piloted her personal strike craft, weaving through the battlefield with precision. Daniel sat in the co-pilot seat, handling weapon systems like a seasoned warrior. We're coming up on the command ship, Zyra announced. Daniel's fingers flew over the console, activating stealth shields. They won't see us coming. The massive Dravkar flagship loomed ahead, surrounded by an energy barrier. It pulsed with power, protecting the enemy warlord inside. Barriers too strong for direct fire, Zyra muttered. Daniel smirked. Good thing I brought an explosive backup plan. They landed inside the enemy flagship under cloak, sneaking past Dravkar patrols. The halls were dark, illuminated by eerie red lighting. Zyra gripped her twin plasma blades, while Daniel readied his Terran pulse rifle. We take out the warlord. The invasion crumbles, Daniel whispered. Zyra nodded. Let's end this. They stormed into the command center, where the Dravkar warlord stood waiting. A monstrous figure, wrapped in black exo armor, turned to face them. His mandibles clicked, and his yellow eyes burned with hatred. You are too late, he hissed. The Empire falls today. Zyra twirled her plasma blades. Not while I still breathe. The warlord lunged. The room erupted in battle. Zyra's blades clashed against his massive energy staff, the air crackling with power. Daniel dodged plasma fire, returning shots with pinpoint accuracy, dropping enemy guards one by one. The warlord was strong, but Zyra was faster. With a swift spin and a deadly strike, she sliced through his armor, her blade sinking deep into his chest. The warlord let out a furious shriek, his massive body collapsing. The room fell silent. Daniel exhaled. Well, that was dramatic. Zyra smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. With their leader dead, the Dravkar forces fell into disarray. The Zelvarian fleet pushed forward, decimating what remained of the invaders. The war was over before it even began. Back on Zelvaria, Zyra stood beside Daniel as they watched the celebration below. You fought well, human, she admitted. Daniel grinned. So did you, princess. She sighed. I still don't want to marry you. Daniel chuckled. I figured. But hey, at least now we know we make a great team. Zyra smirked. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't hate him as much as she thought. For now, though, the Empire was safe.